Welcome to Shelf Life. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. Louise Strachan, and I have three great books here with me: Defining Deandra, The Train Ride, both of which are novels, and her latest book, The Struggle and Triumph of Africans in the Diaspora. Well, Dr. Strachan, wonderful to have you here. Welcome to
Thank you
Shelf
for
Life.
having me here.
I'm looking forward to getting into the meat of the matter with this book, The Struggle and Triumph. But before we get to all of that, let's talk a little bit about you. It's nice to always get to know the author and get some information about you.
Why not? I was born in Jamaica, got my elementary education here, and I left here as a young person.
Oh, okay.
And I left and lived in Africa.
Okay, where in Africa did you live?
I lived in Liberia for some time. And from there I went on to England to school, and from England to USA, and where I acquired most of my education in USA. But my background started off in healthcare, nursing.
Okay, that's an interesting
Right,
road
switch
to take.
from nursing to medical technology, to anthropology, to being in public health, to teaching and research.
Wonderful.
And now an author.
Tell me about your experience in Liberia, because all of us want to live in Africa.
Right,
at some point.
of course. When I went there, it was on the verge of development, and of course you had peace and quiet. Okay, so cars were few, but the people were friendly. There was a distinct division between groups.
Okay.
A group that called themselves, who really migrated, the Africans who were in America, went back to Liberia. They call themselves America Liberian. And then the indigenous Liberians, they were Liberians. And the American Liberians, they really had the upper hand. They were the rulers, at least when I went there, that's what I saw. The government was more or less designed as to the U.S. government.
Really?
They had what was called the True Whig Party, and we know more about that. We know that's long ago, right? And the Republican and all that, but that's what they knew. So they really were the leaders. And I met interesting people. I met Jamaicans.
There's quite a contingent of Jamaicans.
Yeah,
in
I met
Liberia.
Jamaicans. And I met Barbadian. A Barbadian lady was there. And Americans, of course. And I developed close connection with some of those people.
I have a friend of mine who was actually born in Liberia, and I only found out like 2 years ago that he was born in Liberia.
Right, because you see, a lot of people went over there, especially because they were believers in Garvey. And I think that was a push, because Mr. Garvey wanted to go to Liberia. He was saying everyone must go to Africa, but Liberia was a place that he had his eyes set on, because he knew that it was a free country then, where the African Americans had migrated to Liberia. So on account of that, I think you find a lot of people who were really aware of what he was talking about. They were Garveyites, and I met some of them over there.
And it's interesting that there are more Garveyites everywhere else except in Jamaica.
Exactly.
Here we have such a hard time getting people to accept Garvey.
You wonder why?
A prophet is not without honor except in his own country. This is true. So in the U.S., that's where you did your anthropology PhD?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Because this book, for me, and I hate to jump to the book because I don't normally jump to the book immediately, had so much information that was true to me and is true of today. And when we look at how far back some of these things go, we understand a little bit more about ourselves. What was your push for going into anthropology?
Well, when I lived in Africa, of course, and went there, I was young and didn't even understand the culture. And it dawned on me then I was rather ignorant. I knew so little, and therefore I had to adapt, and I started to learn. And then going to Europe, to England again, you were in another environment where people didn't understand your culture, even although you were colonized. Then I went to America, of course, now, and went to college. I remember one of the first courses I took was African anthropology. So African anthropology, and I said, well, this is something I must keep in the back of my mind that I would like to study. Okay. And then as the years went by, they developed a course that said people who had health background, whether they were in nursing, whatever area in health, they could switch and get certain courses and get into anthropology. Okay. So then I went and got a master's, because at that time I had my BSc, my MED, which was a double master's in education, and then after I went and got my master's in anthropology,
and that just took you all the way
to medical anthropology.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break. We're talking with Dr. Louise Spencer Strachan. And the book that we're going to be discussing today is The Struggle and Triumph of Africans in the Diaspora. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Shelf Life is brought to you by Jam Copy, Protect, Respect, Access, Jamaica Business Journal, relevant, insightful, informative, Talawa Magazine for the latest news in culture and the arts, and Bookophilia, Live Inspired. Welcome back to Shelf Life. We're speaking with Dr. Louise Spencer Strachan. And before the break, we were talking about her experiences in Liberia and what took her into the world of anthropology. Before we get to the book that we're really going to discuss today, I want to talk a little bit about your two novels, Defining D'Andro and The Train Ride. Tell me about these books and what made you write these books. They're actually pretty fun books.
I consider them fun book and in cultural too. You see, after I came home, and of course I had time on my hand, I decided, well, I wanted to extend my imagination. So I started thinking about writing a novel, and that was when I started with D'Andro. And the name I use is a pseudonym. It's called Newformer.
Yes.
But I was trying then to play a trick, to see if I put Newformer, and people, when they read this book, will they realize that I'm really talking about Jamaica?
And I realized it right away, that this Newformer was actually Jamaica.
Exactly. And of course, throughout the book, I've brought up a lot of things about Jamaica. I brought up the culture in terms of spirituality,
right?
The culture of healing.
Yeah, the culture of man and woman relationships.
Man and woman, exactly, man and woman relationship. And the food and everything, the texture. You see, there's a rich texture of Jamaica that's infiltrated in this book.
In this book. And the first thing that I found really pulling in this book, first thing that got to me was, and without giving away the book, D'Andro had somebody who loved her, truly loved her. This man really loved her. But she just kept running from him, you know, and it's amazing that we always hear that we have this tendency to pull away from the people who really love us. We're always going after the people who don't want us or who don't love us. And I thought that was quite a theme in this book.
Thank you.
And how she had to go and find herself, because she was quite an independent woman.
She was indeed. She was indeed.
So she came home to Newformer.
And really Jamaica.
She's really Jamaica. And went back to Cedar Grove, where she was born. And she had left as a small child. And in this book, she learns how to deal with her own culture.
Exactly.
I'd say a must read for anybody who is born in Jamaica but was transplanted is the word I like
Transplant
to use.
is a word, yes, I like that.
Transplanted elsewhere and then came back home.
We're all transplants, as a matter of fact.
We're all transplants, aren't we? Yeah, everybody's a transplant from somewhere. The Train Ride. Now this one, I must confess, I didn't get a chance to finish reading. So this one you're going to have to tell me about.
This one really originates in Washington, and it's talking about young family and working class African American who worked hard, and they raised two girls. And at that time, you know, there were a lot of confusion and some of the things that continue now, a lot of gang banging and things of that nature with drugs and things that we could see around us. So I try to pull from that, because I know negative things have been said so often about families, especially people of color,
right?
That, and I know it's not true, we have some truths, but not all of that is true.
Well, there are truths like that in all cultures.
Exactly.
All ethnicities have their issues.
So this is really to show the strength of a black family who, although they were working class, but they were so intent on making good with what they had and growing up their daughters the right way. And there were some tragedies, of course, because the father died.
Right.
I think his death came about because a son, I don't want to give away the story, got shot. The same thing, just walking accidentally.
Which is very real to us here in Jamaica.
Exactly, it's happening now.
Oh my goodness, it's happening right now.
And got shot, right. And he went into a state of depression and he died. And of course, the mother also developed and she had surgery, which also affects us. And it affected the entire family. I think the youngest girl was more so affected. And whatever she did, she took it to a different level. And whatever, she came out of it. But the oldest one now was, the girl is Tawana. And she wanted to travel to make a life of her own.
And away from all this tragedy.
Exactly. And
this book is very, from what you're saying, is very real to what we're experiencing today.
And for young people especially.
For young people today, because so many of our families are being torn apart in this country by violence. You know, it's so easy to just be walking in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Exactly.
And get shot.
Exactly.
For myself, I've gotten to the point where I'm almost, not quite yet, but almost paranoid. But in some places.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm not going there because that's another thing. I wrote and I gave a lecture on paranoia. And I had a conversation with a psychiatrist once to ask, what did he think of paranoia? He said, well, so forth. I said, I see it in my view as positive and negative, because when you have paranoia that it does not cripple you, it makes you become alert.
Keeps you aware.
There's so many things that have happened to us. Had we been aware, we would not have been trapped. So anyway.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about this book.
Yes.
As soon as we come back from the break, The Struggle and Triumph of Africans in the Diaspora. And you notice I have all my little tabs. So we have a lot to talk about.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're watching Shelf Life. Shelf Life is brought to you by Jam Copy. Protect, respect, access. Jamaica Business Journal. Relevant, insightful, informative. Talawa Magazine for the latest news in culture and the arts. And Bookophilia. Live inspired. Welcome back to Shelf Life. We're going to get to the meat of the matter with the real book that we want to talk about, The Struggle and Triumph of Africans in the Diaspora, something that affects all of us. Miss Louise, need to talk to you about this book so badly, because people talk about the fact that slavery was so long ago. Why are we still talking about slavery? Why are we still saying that slavery is still affecting us? Is it really still affecting us?
In my view, and as an anthropologist, I think it does. And for us to say it's been so long ago, 100 or 150 years ago, it's not that long, you know. And what I try to emphasize in this book, we talk about what we have been through, not to be paranoid, as you say, or to have what is called a negative outlook to life, but to say, look what we have come through. We have traveled, we have travailed, whatever we want to call it.
So it's a triumphant thing.
It's a triumphant thing. And it's because we are very strong people that were able to survive and be triumphant. So therefore, I think we have a lot of pluses despite. And if we don't know our history, then we wouldn't be able to compare. Because by looking back, it helps us to move forward.
Right. Where do you think we have reached, though, when we look at what's happening in the U.S., for example?
That's so pitiful. Because
does it feel like we're taking a few steps backward?
In a sense, yes. I would say my friend Sister Smart is an American, and she would speak to that I lived there for most of my life, and I'd seen a lot of changes. And I think that there are some good things done, but I think Is it because of the system and it's been so
ingrained.
embedded and ingrained for a
Yes.
long time that it's not so easy to throw off?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because you brought me to a passage that I do want to read. In here you say, in a racist society, the racist is a normal individual.
That's what the writer says.
And that is so true, you
It's
know,
true.
and that is from Littlewood and Lipsedge.
That's right.
Accepting the fact that environment helps to shape our lives, is it not plausible to say not everyone who lives in a society, except under totalitarian rule, subscribes to all its rules? What if individuals are forced to live in a given environment due to circumstances? Should all such persons be judged or called racist without demonstrating specific behaviors? And it's a very good question, because when we look back on what's happening in the US right now, and having lived in the US for several years myself, in our head we tend to think of all Republicans as racists, and all,
Which is wrong.
Which is wrong. Which is wrong. And even here in Jamaica, we tend to think that all fair-skinned Jamaicans think of all dark-skinned Jamaicans in a certain way.
Which is wrong, because
is
my
also
mother
wrong.
was a mulatto, even though you'd be able to tell.
My mother had Chinese blood.
Exactly.
My mother was more Chinese
and my
than
family
anything
is so
else.
mixed up, we wouldn't even go there. Every nationality I think about in my family now.
You talk about color coding in your book. Explain what color coding is.
Color coding, you see, is the same thing when you say we're getting to this point where you're light brown and you're browning and you're black, you're not as pretty. These is color coding. And you get into using these codes, and some of them are subtlety, right? And after a while, they become like a stigma when
Yeah.
you tell certain people. We would tell our children, "You're too black and ugly."
My grandmother, and I almost feel like I'm having this interview again. My grandmother, who was as dark as night, had that issue.
Yeah,
You know,
well.
she told me the first time, make sure you don't marry a man too black. You don't know anything too black, no
Exactly,
good.
exactly.
So it is a stigma that we have placed on ourselves.
Exactly.
And you
But
talk
you
about
see,
that in
we have
here.
placed it on ourselves because a lot of us have not come to realize that we are as good as anyone, and we have believed the myths. Because lots of these things that we have read, they are myths.
And
they
you talk
were not,
about those myths
They were
inside
not
here.
proven facts to say that people of color, especially African people, with a lot of melanin, are inherently inferior. These things were blatantly untrue.
Yes.
I even did psychological studies. And to note, I have a part in there that where the psychologist, he was the first psychologist, American psychologist, to be knighted. And when it came out that all the material that he used, they were falsification. What he
Wow.
was doing, he was saying he had studied black people and so forth, and children, how they
And he
turned
pretty
to be.
just made it up.
He made it up because he was his own, what you say, critic. He had his own journal.
He was his own information.
He was well a master of so. But these things people come to believe.
You say here, I must hasten to say that although many young Jamaicans are seemingly confused about their color, as evidenced by the skin bleaching, this is a problem that we're
It
having.
is.
And, you know, that we're having with our kids and our young people who are bleaching their skin because of this color coding issue. It's something that we really need to get past.
Right, we
need
should,
we need to
but-
make our way past it.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is going too quickly for me. Too quickly for me. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we have a special guest in the house, and we're going to have a nice open discussion about the struggle and triumph of Africans in the diaspora. Shelf Life is brought to you by Jam Copy, Protect, Respect, Access, Jamaica Business Journal, relevant, insightful, informative, Talawa Magazine for the latest news in culture and the arts, and Bookophilia, Live Inspired. Welcome back to Shelf Life. We have another guest with us this morning, Mariam Samad, a young lady who is going to share with us and do some discussion with us. And yes, you are still a young lady, about this great book. Now, you've read the book.
Yes.
And you're obviously excited.
Yes.
Tell us about your thoughts on this book and your feelings.
Well, the first thing, it should be in every school, church, and home.
Okay.
Home first, of course, school and church. Because it really spells out what we all need to know. Some of us have had it in the universities and the middle schools, but there are many of us out here who really need to know
Who we are.
who we are. You know, the introduction, it has 9 chapters. And I said to myself, my God, that's when I got excited, you know, because remember, I'm not Jamaican, but I've lived in Jamaica for over 30-something years now. The research that my sister had to go, my baby daughter, had to go through to get this, because there's so much denial of these 3 things. We're still denying. There's no such thing as racism. Are you kidding?
Oh no, it's alive and it's well.
This thing over there in the United States with the little 17-year-old
Yes.
boy and that man, and people swear there's racism is over in the United States.
It
Well,
is
it's the
far
same
from
here.
over, and it's not over here either. Would you agree?
That's right.
Yes,
Dr.
of course.
She wrote it.
But a lot of denial, you know. We live in denial stage constantly. I don't know why we're afraid. And to me, when there's a problem, the only way you can solve it is to talk about it.
Talk about it. What I find in this book that we don't talk about a lot here is who we were before slavery.
You are so right.
Who we were before we were enslaved as a people.
As I do.
The unfortunate thing is that some of us have come to accept the myth that slavery was our only existence, which indeed slavery wronged us because we were kidnapped. Civilization is from Africa. Can't be denied.
I taught at Chartwood Community College for about 8 years here, and I always started with ancient Egypt. Always with ancient Egypt.
Right.
In fact, one of the students told me he didn't want to know anything about it because all he wanted to know was Jesus' time and on. And I put him out of the class because I start with Egypt. If we could just look at ourselves and see ourselves for who we were, the ancients, Akhenaten and his mother, you know.
What we have to understand that all civilizations go through changes.
Right.
And something happened. How did African get to the bottom and certain things happen? But when you travel and see for yourself, because reading alone is not sufficient, and see those monuments that were really built, you said, my goodness, did we really have it? But I tell you something. What we're talking about, denial, that a lot of us become very embarrassed when we talk about the greatness and the good things we have accomplished.
We were talking a little bit earlier about the Maroons, and you were saying that, did we ever stop to think that maybe they really didn't understand the treaty that they were signing?
I think so, in my view, because you see, it was not just a coincidence or an accident. The people who went to Brazil, and they organized and had their own country within Brazil. For 100 years they ruled. And the only way that they could get them to sign a treaty was the clause was there that they should not entertain any other runaway enslaved. And my question is that indeed, after Kojo had signed that treaty, Kojo, they still continue to harbor runaway enslaved people. As a
leading you to believe they didn't really understand the treaty.
So my thinking is that at that time he could read, but how good could he read?
And understand.
And understand this, the legal language is so convoluted in my thinking that even lawyers have to get specialization.
Right, to
help
be able
them
to
out.
understand it.
So I would hope that, scholars and people who have, I don't have the money to do that research, would go back and to do some deeper research in terms of looking really, when he signed it, what kind of a pressure was there.
Was he under?
Instead of we have, again, a division to say the Maroons were bad people because... Right. Yes, if it came out just as if they knew everything, we'd say they were selfish. Yeah. When you're running for 40 years...
Yeah, at some point you want to stop.
You're tired.
Yes.
Well, we're running out of time.
Yes.
I really just wanted to very quickly mention this because this was, for me, a big eye-opener. The real McCoy. Did you ever wonder where the phrase, the real McCoy, came from? Well, Elijah McCoy was a black man who invented quite a few things. But because, as Dr. Strachan will tell you, because he was black, he had to run these inventions through white people to get them accepted. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where whenever one of these people brought up an invention and they brought it to be done, they would ask, is this the real McCoy? Mm-hmm. So
that's right,
there's a great story that you'll hear in the struggle and triumph of the Africans and in the diaspora. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Shelf Life. I'll see you again next week, same time, when we have another wonderful conversation with another wonderful Jamaican author.